You know what? I'm done being single. I'm not good at it. Look, obviously you can't tell a woman you just met that you love her, but it sucks that you can't. I'll tell you something though. If a woman, not you, just some hypothetical woman, were to bear with me through all this, I think I'd make a damn good husband. Because that's the stuff I'd be good at. Stuff like making her laugh, and being a good father, and walking her 5 hypothetical dogs. Being a good kisser. Penis. Will, why did you... Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devin Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Sejan Sarowick. Sejan?
Yeah, can we take that back from the start, and can you be 5 times more desperate and gross, please?
I guess I could be if we didn't have a special guest here. If we
Could
didn't have...
a man truly be, apparently, Ted Mosby? Sorry, we were doing the thing, and I'm ranting already.
No, it's fine. I ended up ending it with penis because I just felt kind of gross after saying it. And joining us for this episode of the Say Report, we have a special guest. I mean, he's not like a super special guest. We weren't able to get like someone who'd been on the show before, but definitely someone who's like a part of the group. It'd be weird if he wasn't here. He's the marshal of our little gang here. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for Quizmaster General Will Fournier. Will?
Penis.
He said penis.
If you want to cast me as the Marshall-esque character, then penis will be where I start, and then I'll follow it with a small giggle as I enjoy my try saying penis.
While you eat a giant bowl of cereal, which I'm pretty sure he does in basically every role that he has in that decade. Because I'm pretty sure he's seen me eat a giant bowl of cereal in Forgetting Sarah Marshall, in Knocked Up,
Yep.
He definitely eats one in Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
I think maybe he just gets hungry on set, and he's like, "Can I have cereal?" And they're like, "Yeah, we'll write it into the character."
Well, this is apparently when he was smoking like 10 packs a day, like no shit, like going through like cartons of cigarettes on set, for, like in less than the 10-hour shoot time. Like,
yeah,
he's a dude that does not take care of his body, and it is a shame.
Yeah, well,
he is a genius.
All right. I don't know if Will's the marshal. It was just fun to say, but also in that scenario, Sejan, you'd be the Ted, and I don't know how you'd feel about that.
I'm terrible, if any indication is
Dick burn. Wow.
Well, so it's interesting that you say that. Have you discussed what we're doing today before we get to?
No, I haven't. I really wanted to get into everything that we're doing today.
Kids.
101 episodes ago, we did our first Epicsode, which is what we're calling them now, where we looked at High Fidelity. And the reason we looked at High Fidelity is Hulu got it under its craw that the world needed a television reboot of the story of Rob Gordon and High Fidelity. So it came as this show. And we decided, Siege and I, and with Will as a guest, to look through the book, the movie, and the TV show and decide why. Why are they doing this again? And we call
say, Will, that I don't know why he keeps adding the like asterisks of you being a guest. As far as I'm concerned, on these episodes, you are key to us figuring this shit out together.
Yeah, it's true. It's not an episode if Will isn't here, but he's not usually here. And if it's somebody's first episode of the Say Report, first of all, welcome. That's the thing.
Welcome, and what have you been doing? What have you been doing in your life? This is your first episode.
Yeah, but you have to treat every episode of a podcast as if it might be somebody's first. It's weird, and I don't want them to fall in love with Will, as it's so easy to do, and then be disappointed when next week they only hear him at the end of the episode.
Fair enough, but
much like Marshall.
But that is why we're diving today into How I Met Your Mother. Well. Yeah. How I Met Your Dad. Well,
How I Met Your Franchise?
Yeah, okay. That's the off mic way we've been discussing it, right? So I'm down for that. The How I Met Your Father series has just begun on Hulu.
And I don't know. I was a huge fan of How I Met Your Mother. You're going to see a deep, dark side of Devin Decker in this episode. I apologize in advance for that. But as somebody who absolutely bought into How I Met Your Mother in the beginning, and then by the end almost felt like deeply betrayed by how it ended. I feel a weird.
Do you remember the dad in Wall Street with Charlie Sheen there, his dad specifically, and how he brings his dad in on the whole like retirement plan thing and will invest and blah blah blah, and then at the end of the movie, like, you know, Gordon Gekko fucks him and fucks his dad and takes all their money, and there's this moment and in that particular storyline between the two of them where Charlie Sheen is obviously filled with regret about what he's done, and he realizes how much he screwed his father, and not just his father, but all of his father's friends and his father's friends and everyone at this company. Devin, you're like Charlie Sheen to Pamela Fry's Gordon Gekko, and you came unto the URI theater department and you promised us this retirement plan. You said, look, we're going to watch the show. This is what we're going to do. You bought DVDs for people. Like, there were moments where I was like, what are we doing tonight? And they're like, oh, I got to get caught up on How I Met Your Mother because Devin wants to talk about it tomorrow. Okay, let's do that. Like the way in which you and this show permeated the culture of that department cannot be overstated.
Apparently it can't, because I was gonna like, I thought I was gonna go deep and heavy on it and like kind of have a mea culpa moment for the whole How I Met Your Mother thing. Which also, mea culpa moment regarding How I Met Your Father before we go much further into this episode. Hulu has done the weekly release before, just not with any of the shows that I watch, like Letterkenny or High Fidelity. So it's not new that How I Met Your Father is only doing an episode a week, even most recently with Only Murders in the Building. So I apologize for that. And I also apologize for, that permeation of the URI theater department with How I Met Your Mother. I guess it's nice proof of just how magnanimous and influential a character I was in 2005. And yeah.
No, man. I like to kind of give a background on where I am with this show. Like, Devin clearly invested. You guys listen to the show, or if you don't, go and listen to the show. But Devin is very much the kind of guy that will tape 10 episodes of television and then watch them all, right? I, especially at this time, was very into, like, if we're gonna watch something, I need to like watch it together, watch it with people, right? So that's why I watched a bunch of like BBC stuff, Doctor Who and things like that, Black Books and stuff, was because Kevin, and like all of those guys were watching that stuff. Or I would get together with Boz and the guys, and that was where we would watch like a bunch of movies together that I had never seen before and things like that. So it was really kind of hard for me to get into something unless the crowd was into it, right? I think around the same time, was this when Modern Family started, or was it a little bit after
Modern
this?
Family was a little bit after this.
Yeah,
the other show that started
alongside
alongside How I Met Your Mother was My Name Is Earl. Yeah.
Okay, so My Name Is Earl is not something that a lot of people around me got into, so I didn't get into it until like later in its like life, and it had a bunch of people watching it. But the reason that I thought of Modern Family is because I had the same issue with Modern Family, air quotes, like first world problems, of like everybody around me was aware of it and like talking about it, but nobody was actively like, oh my god, we need to sit down and watch this right now, especially at a time of like DVD availability and things like that, and like, you know, pirating shit. Like, there was no reason to not watch a thing if people wanted to watch it. And so the idea being like, it's what everybody's talking about, but nobody's doing it right now near me, meant that I didn't really get into this show until after the first season was done. Those DVDs had been available, and it started to hit that kind of phase of just like I need something. I need something I like know every inch of. I need that comfort food. I need that Christmas sweater. And so people would start putting on How I Met Your Mother all of a sudden, as if it were like Friends that they had been, literally the show Friends that they had been with for like decades. But that's not, or I guess a decade and a half at that point. But it was so weird to me to suddenly see the shift from How I Met Your Mother, from the show that everybody is like talking about watching, to this show that now everybody has watched and now they're going back to. And that was kind of where I landed on getting into this show, and I enjoyed it. I guess by that point, I guess you'd say we were probably into like season, like at least late season 2, if not season 3. So like there was already a plethora of stuff for me to dive into, and I had a hell of a good couple of nights like hanging out with certain people until like 3 o'clock in the morning watching How I Met Your Mother, like
watching my set of DVDs that I let that certain someone, let's refer to her as Robin, And while you're Ted in this scenario, you're gonna make me the villain. I'm gonna air some things. And I said to Will, I'm not gonna do it, but I looked for my DVD set last night to watch the first episode, and Robin never returned the first disc. So I have disc 2 and 3.
Devin was concerned that the music would be different on a streaming service than the original and everything else. So wanted to watch the original proper DVD release. And he couldn't, and he was annoyed.
Dude, I also can't find my hard drive that has every episode of How I Met Your Mother on it that I pirated at the time, right? I think there's a statute of limitations on it. If not, I'm going straight to jail. But yeah,
some cop has that somewhere. Don't worry.
Yeah,
Man. So my position with How I Met Your Mother is that like it is a show that I very much enjoyed, kind of like out of time. Both I wasn't there when it premiered, and I'm not into it now. So like there was this weird in between time where I was kind of into it, but didn't really have much else to do with it. Like it wasn't like a thing that I got so invested in that I was like, I need T-shirts. I need to go buy a suit. I need to like that didn't happen.
All right. And then meanwhile, on the other side of the pond, a young man is there 4 years before we're going to meet him. Will, what was your experience with How I Met Your Mother?
I think I was probably in a similar kind of situation as Sejan in that I didn't get into it straight away, partly because it didn't come to the UK straight away, because things didn't always get across at the time. And then when it did come across, it was on probably a channel 4 or even E4, which was on like the cable network channels we had, that would have shown it around about that kind of 9 o'clock on a Thursday night kind of show, which was all well and good. But at the time I was working and running bars, so Thursday night at 9 p.m. I was rarely home.
Yeah.
And then they would show reruns of it the next morning at 10 or 11 in the morning, which was perfect because I was just waking up. But it also meant they showed weirdly edited, cut down versions in the morning. Because, you know, it's family friendly at 10 a.m. We can't show the full episode of whatever it would have been.
You can't show the full Mosby. Yeah, no, I get you.
No, you can't have all those penis jokes. And I probably hit the similar thing around about that kind of, probably while I was over with you guys in 2008, 2009, got into it probably then because it was just so readily available and probably constantly on somewhere, showing reruns and full series in a day and that kind of stuff. But I'd also probably seen by then Knocked Up, Forgetting Sarah Marshall, maybe even I Love You Man, and had a kind of Jason Segel idea in my head.
Yeah.
And then went back to the beginning of How I Met Your Mother and was like, oh, it's that guy from All the Things. He's younger and playing the same character again. That's cool. Yeah. I can get into this show. And then you realize, you know, he's a wonderful part of it, and I think he comes out of it looking a lot better than most of the rest of the cast. And you go, these bits are great, and then there's Ted.
And then there's Ted.
And then there's Ted. That's like the other name of this show. No, just to clarify though, you are blaming Devin for it being around you as well, Ben, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I heard. Exactly what I heard was I came to you awry, and then everybody cared about this show. And if Devin Decker was the impetus of that in the culture I exchanged into, then cool. This is fun for me. It's like It's a Wonderful Life, but with a TV show.
Yeah.
And how if I hadn't been there, maybe people would have had a better life. This is great. I'm a jump, Clarence. I'm a jump.
Can we get to the good part where we can talk about the stuff I actually really still love about this, or do we have to talk about that bad stuff first? Was that what we're doing?
I mean, I think if we get rid of the bad stuff first, we're good. I mean, and I think it's time to transition into some of that good stuff, because I'm sitting here accused as being this person who brought this sort of infectious disease of a television show to a population. And I want to make sure that everybody understands that while I will admit that as soon as I watched the first episode, they hooked me. I was so into this show from moment one, and the real reason why I was into the show was not the reason that I will probably elaborate on much more as we go forward, but it's more the fact that that first episode ends and we are told that Robin Scherbatsky is not married to Ted Mosby, that she is Aunt Robin. And
in a way, it promises an anti-romance between the two of them. We are immediately told in the beginning, these are not the two that end up together. Oh shit! Because like now it's not a will they won't they, it's a when won't they, and that is a whole new thing, right? Like that is the hook that this show brings. That and its time structure, but that's a different thing to talk about. But that to the romantic side of the romantic sitcom, the hook that they bring is I'm going to introduce you to the two lovebirds, and guess what? They are not the two that end up together, and that's like whoa, like I'm joking, but I'm not. Like it is actually kind of just like all right, touche.
Yeah,
and I think that it's beautiful to see something like that. Like instead of a sitting there, a Ross and Rachel kind of thing, or whatever it may be, that's like what's going to be the spark that finally gets these two together. We've already seen the spark. We know it. What you're waiting for now is what's the fail that breaks them apart.
Yeah.
And that's much more interesting to see that within a relationship rather than they've been friends for a while and they've always been flirting and then suddenly one night they have a drink and look, they're together and it's wonderful.
Yeah.
This is they're together and wonderful. What's going to go wrong? And I mean, I know that it's nice to see happy love stories, but also inside you're like, I kind of hate these people and I want them to fail. So how are they going to fail?
That's definitely an element for me now. You're not wrong.
Yeah. No, I mean, and then for me though, I mean, I've always hated growing up that Hollywood felt the need to inject a love story into everything. And it's why something like A Few Good Men is my favorite movie, because even though Hollywood's like, you need to have Joe Galloway go out on a date with Daniel Kaffee, Dan Kaffee and Joe Galloway are not romantically interested in each other. They will probably never see each other again now that this case is over. And I love that. I love that A Few Good Men doesn't have a love story. So when you get this show that has some interesting characters in it, namely for me, Marshall, Robin, and that thing I still haven't talked about yet, I'm going to be there for it, especially when I'm promised the fact that they're not going to end up together. So even if they are together at some point, it's not going to be forever. And she's not the mother of these kids. So there's also more story to go on. Like we don't already see the full path laid out for us. There is an element of mystery.
This is the moment that I should like remind everybody that like we're well aware where this is going. All right, stop like looking at your iPod like, oh boy, you guys are in for a surprise. We know.
Yeah.
like that's and I mean like that's important to remember, because the reason why How I Met Your Mother doesn't work for me anymore is in large part that you are talking about this beautiful thing that it sets up, and and as I already admitted, that's the hook of the show, right? Like this is it, and this is the thing they can't fuck up, and it's the thing they fuck up. Everything else is gravy, and that's just it, right? It's what Friends, I'm going to say this, did right. The Ross and Rachel will they won't they when they conversation, ending it on a quote-unquote cliffhanger, not really, but enough of one that you can say, well, we don't know, right, is perfect. It was perfect for that relationship, like, because it fulfilled the promise in a way that no true answer ever could have, right? This makes such a hardcore promise, and they just fucking whiff it at the end. And it is what colors the back half of that show for everybody.
It is what colors that show in perpetuity. There's a reason why. Well, we're not even at the franchise yet. We're talking about just the A New Hope of the franchise, and the fact that show, as soon as that was the finale, How I Met Your Mother, it was like Thanos snapped his fingers and it disappeared from existence. People stopped talking about it. All of these channels that had like gut syndication deals for it, those syndication deals, they just ended. Like How I Met Your Mother was in syndication for maybe 2 years maximum before you couldn't see it anywhere. And that was so strange.
Like I said to you, like a couple of days ago, and I was trying to watch these to, watch the pilots to get into this. It's not on a streaming service in Australia. I had to search for it online. I found it is actually apparently buried in the back of Disney somewhere, but did not come up in a search when I typed in How I Met Your. So it's on there, but they didn't want me to watch it.
Man.
And I think it's any show where you can go, like we've all seen shows that had endings where people disagreed. Lost is a prime example where everyone's like, oh, that's what happened, and it feels a bit pointless. This is the full example of, like, you could just watch the pilot and be like, that's the show. Everything's done. Don't bother with the next 9 seasons of this show. Because they're not, they go somewhere, but they revert to type and end up exactly where you were at the beginning.
Well,
you know,
why are you setting up so many beautiful
endings.
segues?
People just don't like endings, Will. You know, they just when a thing that they love comes to an end, they're angry about it. They don't know how to express themselves, and so they aim it at the most the most vulnerable parts of it, the actors.
Ladies and gentlemen, Thomas Bayes on the Say Report, apparently.
Poor Josh Radnor. It's a quote of his.
Oh, I knew it was one of
6
them.
Months ago.
I knew I heard it before.
Yeah, why did they talk to? Oh, was it Game of Thrones ending? What was it that ended? And everybody and Josh Radnor felt the need to chime in about how, like, well, people don't like endings. You know?
Was Game of Thrones, and the fact that the 8th season just shit its pants, which is also not hyper surprising considering the books that the series is based on aren't done yet.
Yeah, it's very hard to get ahead of your source material and then be like, we know how it's going to end. Nope, no one likes that.
Well, and then you know, you look at something like The Sopranos, and people bitched and moaned about the way that show ended. But God, you look back on it now, and it looks like gold compared to this and fucking Game of Thrones.
Well, yeah,
but you know,
there's a few things. Whenever something is that big and you have to end it, that's not easy. But things like you say, Sopranos did a great job. Breaking Bad did a pretty solid job on how that came around.
Yeah,
it is doable with the right people and the right writers, I guess. But then this seems like everyone wants to have the happy ending, so you've got to force a happy ending somewhere.
The actual problem.
I take it in terms of.
Nope. Continue. Sorry.
I was going to bring 500 Days of Summer into the conversation, which is in this mode. Like from day one, the very beginning, they're like, this doesn't work out because something's done, and that was fine and that was good because it went and it stayed with that narrative. If they'd put a scene at the end where it's like, oh, and then she came around and everything was fine and they're really happy, then it would have, that movie's, suddenly out of everyone's, oh, I didn't enjoy it because it suddenly became too Hollywood at the end.
Yeah.
Or sometimes you just don't enjoy that movie, maybe because you didn't watch it at the time when it was relevant to the zeitgeist. And you can hear an episode called 367 Days of Bummer on the Say Report where I elaborate on that. But you're right. What I didn't like that movie was not, they set out a goal and then fulfilled that goal. It was more, I don't connect to this type of story anymore.
Yeah.
And that just makes sense because it's about a young man in love. And at the time, I'm 30 years old watching 500 Days of Summer. And like, that's not what love is anymore for me.
You don't have that wonderful, youthful Jason Gordon-Levitt style.
But what I would like to say is one of the other issues with How I Met Your Mother is they very much had an idea for how the story would go, and then the show becomes a victim of its own success, where CBS is continually asking them to produce more and more content for this series.
Yeah.
And despite that extra content completely changing the dynamic and the story that is being told, at the end of the day, they're like, but we're going to stick with the original ending. Which is really why it feels like a betrayal, because all this growth that you see these characters go through is undone. And it really becomes strange if you watch the first episode of How I Met Your Mother, followed by the last episode of How I Met Your Mother, because then it's like, well, this guy didn't change at all in 9 years.
You know why it feels really, truly like a betrayal, and I'm only kind of realizing this in retrospect, is it's the selling out of the entire concept. They sell out the art of their piece in order to make the more money and the more seasons and all that, right? And I know that that's a really oversimplification of all of this sort of stuff. And as it is, we already sound like a bunch of dude bros bitching about the end of Game of Thrones and How I Met Your Mother and all that shit.
Yeah.
But the thing is like that it is coming out in a time in television where wild shit is happening. The landscape is changing. We're getting into the golden era where we're like creators are given the ability to just do the things they want to do. A show is only going to be 5 seasons. Fine, it's only going to be 5 seasons. Boom, bang, done. I only have a 1-season arc for this, and I'm not coming back. Okay, if we want to do this again, we're going to change up the entire fucking atmosphere, and we'll make it an anthology show then. Like there is this kind of shift at this moment, and it comes in riding that wave as one of the little guys, as saying, we're going to come in, we're going to shake this up. If we can score, good enough numbers to survive till season 2, then we're gangbusters. And it ends up skyrocketing and becoming huge. And you say victim of its own success, but in a lot of ways, it just sells out to its own success. You can call it a victim all you want, but at the end of the day, they screw themselves on this show. They know damn well that they set this thing up to be told in, what was it, 3 seasons, 5 seasons?
Dude,
and they get and then they get asked to come back for 3 more seasons, and they're just like, well, shit, guess got to bang this one out. They could have just said no. The other side of this story is something like a Supernatural, where Eric Kripke, who ran that show for the first 5 years, was like, I had a 5-year plan for this. And they were like, we want to make more of this show. And he's like, well, that's good. I'm still going to end my show. I'm going to leave. And you could just give me an EP credit on whatever the fuck you do after this. And then and that show completely changes after season 5 because of that. And for good or for ill, because it then ends up going on for it ends up being a 13-season show. So it more than doubles its amount. So without him, but like Kripke said, this is the show I wanted to make. I made it. You can take the IP. I don't give a shit, but I'm gone. Right. Imagine if at the end of season 5, if he had been like, that's how I met your mother. But I've got more stories to tell, because guess what? You're like your family, and now we have family stories. And then the last couple of seasons have just been other shit that happened. That would have been great. I would have been so on board for that.
If you then move into the story of how you became the kid, the conception, not so much that, but we need to know the silly stuff that happened while they were trying to have a baby. Mm-hmm. That's a good season,
right?
And that would work. And you see with things I think something I read in the back kind of trivia of this is that all the scenes with the kids were shot during the first season. Yeah. So all the way up to the very ending of the episode. So they wouldn't age across the years, and the kids would always be the kids. So that the fact that they knew from day one exactly what was going to happen.
Right.
Dude, not only did they know from day one exactly what was going to happen, they also had it prepared to end at the 13th episode. Because the show was picked up, they had, I believe, at least 2 seasons planned out. That's what they always kind of talk about, is we had a 2-season plan for the show.
Yeah.
But when CBS picked up the original pilot, they said, we're going to give you 13 episodes. And that's where they're like, all right, then Victoria's the mother. Ashley Williams' character is going to be the mother. And then when they got picked up to go further through the season, they're like, well, fuck her then.
Yeah.
And worst decision they ever made.
It reeks of that idea that they had a vision, it was there, and it was present, and then it wasn't until there was just money in front of them that they were just like, well, the vision is whatever. No, because that is what made it work at the beginning, and that's why it feels so gross at the end. Is it is such a clear example of selling out in such a blatant way.
Yes,
it's the kind of this issue that came up with the series 24 when that first came out. The Kiefer Sutherland and Jack Bauer. If you watch the first season, after 12 episodes, everything's sorted out and things finish, because they didn't know if they were getting the full 24. Right. And then in episode 13, a bunch of new shit happens, and then he has 12 hours to sort that out. And that kind of was true for every season following. Around about, I think season 2, 3, 4 were greenlit straight away, so that was fine. But following on from then, everything kind of gets sorted out about halfway through, just in case the season didn't go any further.
Right.
And then a bunch of new stuff has happened. And it seems, and you can see with shows, to use Lost as an example again, they had no idea what was happening after season 3. And they wrote 2 more that they shouldn't have done. And that was because somebody said, hey, we like this show, you can have more time. And they're like, no, we didn't want more time. We were fine, thanks.
There's literally
here's
filler
mine.
seasons of Lost, not just filler episodes. There are straight up filler seasons.
Ooh.
You can skip from 3 to 5 and really not miss anything.
And yet I'm going to stand here as the person who says season 4 is my favorite season of Lost.
That's fine. That is a legitimate feeling to have. I'm just saying in terms of structure and what constitutes a filler,
nothing happens.
You can ignore the entirety of season 4 or season 3 as far as I'm concerned. You could skip 4, and if you go from like you're just like 1, 2, I'm just going to the end. You're good. You got it.
All that stuff with the button in the bunker, that's great stuff. Really interesting. And then,
the numbers, what do they mean?
Season 5. No, let's just watch season 5. And like, what I think you're saying there really, Devin, is you enjoyed Lost 4.0 as its own thing.
Yeah.
I did. I really did. Yeah.
That other people liked.
Well,
you just watched season 4 and like, that's good.
Yeah, and that's a whole other concept, and I will stand by the fact that I think season 3 of Warehouse 13 is one of the greatest seasons of television I've ever seen, and I can never get anybody to watch past the first couple of episodes because season 1 and 2 are just so goddamn goofy. But season 3 of Warehouse 13, if anybody ever gets the chance to see it, just watch it. Ignore 1 and 2. I wish you would watch 1 and 2 because I love that whole show, but just watch season 3. It's fucking nuts. Anthony Michael Hall plays Pinocchio. It's fucking weird.
I'm in. I mean, I've been in for Warehouse 13. Yeah. I've just been looking for the time to start it. And since we're talking about Lost, I think that a show like Lost really influences a show like How I Met Your Mother with all of the mystery elements that they put into the series. How I Met Your Mother is really taking the Lost model and applying it to the 22-minute sitcom. Am I completely off the reservation with that thought, or
no? It's using a lot of that really fun, like kitschy stuff from TV at that time, like the planting of clues and fake clues, and then trying to figure out what's a red herring and all that shit. It's definitely a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like how many Chekhov guns can you have in one episode, and working out which ones are real guns and which ones are prop guns, and it's just for fun.
But the guns have to go off. That's Chekhov's law.
And they can go back to things like the pineapple or the goat or whatever it might be. These can be recurring things. They're like, I'll get to that story. And in some places, that's annoying. Because they're like, I want to know. Stop thinking I'm going to keep watching because you didn't tell me what happened. But then I'm going to keep watching because you didn't tell me what happened.
I do love that in the first episode of How I Met Your Mother, prominently displayed in one episode in their apartment is a copy of the book The Excuse Factory. And really that betrays what this show is and becomes right there in the first episode.
All right. Okay. Like I said, I don't want to spend all my time talking about why this show is what it is, because it's pretty evident, right? Like this is a show that had so much potential and it sold its soul and it just ruined it for everybody, right? So then eventually show ends and everybody gets the idea in their head that, hey, even at its worst, this show was still hitting some pretty high numbers, right? So somebody gets in their head, well, we should do How I Met Your... Well, not How I Met Your Father.
Nope.
How I Met Your Dad.
Do you know why it's called How I Met Your Dad?
No, why?
Because anyone can be a father, but it takes someone special to be a dad.
I'm sorry. Did I miss that quote in the show?
No. That's something that I made my dad a mug when I was like 5 years old, and that's what it says on it. Is anyone can be a father, it takes someone special to be a dad. And
you know what a cone is?
What?
Do you know what a cone is?
I mean, I have a definition of
K-O-H-N.
No, I don't know what a K-O-H-N is.
A cone is a saying that sounds really meaningful when you first hear it, but becomes more meaningless the more you think about it.
Right. But after watching the pilot for How I Met Your Dad, which I guess it's time to transfer a little bit to the next one, I feel like that's why they called it that, because, spoilers for How I Met Your Dad, a show that, unless you're willing to go digging in the deepest parts of the internet, you're probably not going to be able to watch. They reveal at the end who the dad is.
Yeah, just pans across and hey, this guy.
Nick D'Agostino from Fired Up and Mardi Gras.
Well, okay, here's what How I Met Your Dad and How I Met Your Father both decide to do, because in its infancy, in the pilot episode. So just to lay it out, did we talk about the fact that what we watched were at least the first two episodes of How I Met Your Mother, first two episodes of How I Met Your Father, and then the only existing episode of How I Met Your Dad, right?
No, we haven't actually gotten to that point yet. We were also hyped up to beat up on How I Met Your Mother.
I also watched another pilot that we'll discuss at some point, because you said I had to, and I'm upset with you for making me do that.
Oh, why? Because you fell in love like I did? We'll talk about it. Don't worry.
No.
Oh, thank God I'm not alone.
I watched 4 pilots for this episode. 2 of them I hated. One, I looked at like a old relative who's sometimes racist, and you go, it's not good, but it's of its time.
Yeah.
And one made me actually want to keep watching and see some more of the show. I'm sure you can guess which one was which.
Yeah. No, I can definitely label it to them. So there's this promise that is set up at the beginning of How I Met Your Mother, which is the idea of like these two don't end up together, and that's supposed to be like this thing, right? The big shake up to the formula, right? But the problem is, rightly so, How I Met Your Dad and How I Met Your Father both recognize, okay, now they've reset the rules, because basically the zeitgeist of that show has blown up to the point where, like, if we're gonna outwardly call out that show, we have to go against that, right? And so then How I Met Your Dad's response to that is, we're not even going to let the question linger. Boom, here it is. Whereas How I Met Your Father, not to get too spoilery, but like the question is answered in a different way, and we'll talk about it more when we get there, right? But that is that moment, right? Is not only is it to say like hey, like boom, like here's the hook. It's boom, here's the hook, and it's a complete like left field because you thought it was going to be something else entirely because of How I Met Your Mother, right? And it just, the whole problem with How I Met Your Dad that I had is everything feels like it needs to be a response to How I Met Your Mother, as opposed to How I Met Your Father, which we'll get to. But like How I Met Your Dad, every minute of that show feels like it is in direct response to any type of A, criticism, or B, like cool thing that they now need to turn on its head. Like it always feels like there's an agenda behind every moment of that, and it is always directed at How I Met Your Mother, and it sucks.
My How I Met Your Dad notes, the thing that I wrote the most while taking notes during watching it is, this is to How I Met Your Mother. There's that moment where she's talking about her future ex-husband Gavin, and the scene pauses, and the John Madden-esque, like, these are the problems with him all written on the screen, and I'm like, oh, that was really interesting when How I Met Your Mother did it, but How I Met Your Mother earned the ability to do that by taking me on this journey for however many episodes before the first time Ted paused the story and wrote on the screen. Ditto the fact that How I Met Your Dad opens up with that montage, and it's just like, I don't know you people. And this is not a good way to get to know you.
Yeah.
I didn't instantly connect to any character I watched during a montage at the beginning, and I was like, ooh, okay, just a stream of faces. These could be people. They could be just people they've chosen to use in a montage.
Yeah.
And I think the issue, one of the issues I had with it was that, yes, there is that kind of, you have to use a sports metaphor, you have to earn the right to go wide. You don't just get to put the ball out to the sides and see what happens. And that's what this show doesn't do. It's like, oh, you watched How I Met Your Mother, so you get where we're coming from. We're going to do stuff.
Yeah.
And you go, no, they spent seasons building up tropes and ideas and quotes and cool ideas, a lot of which you see in the pilot. You just don't know they're going to become a thing, but they didn't overwhelm you with them. I guess suit up is used a lot in the pilot, but that's a big part of Barney's character, so it works.
Right. Well, and
we finally said Barney, just for the record. 39 minutes. Nice job.
Time clock.
Well, you know what's really funny is you say all of this, and I immediately think of Scrubs season 8, where they wanted to basically just make a whole different show, but somebody in the room, unlike How I Met Your Dad, somebody in the room realized, like, look, if this is where you guys want to start, that's fine, but we can't we can't leave the original show then. So this is no longer its own show. We're now season 8 of the original.
Okay,
Scrubs.
so it's Scrubs season 9 because
9,
season
yeah.
8 is actually pretty good episode, pretty good season of Scrubs.
So, sorry,
even Cynical Devin will admit that. But Med School, which is what it originally aired as. It originally aired as its own spin-off of the Scrubs universe called Med School, but then they're like, well, I don't know. I guess they didn't want to throw it all away.
They literally did it mid-season for the show. They retitled it Scrubs : Med. They went out of their way.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's what I mean. Is like somebody picked up on that heat real quick and they were like, fuck, we gotta tie this back in. We gotta tie this back in. And I feel like that is what like the majority of people in the room on How I Met Your Dad wanted it to go, but like one asshole was holding out and being like, no, it's its own thing. We're not gonna let it do it. We're not gonna tie it down like that. And it's just like, well, then you don't have the right to just assume A, B, and C about your audience anymore. Then,
it's
especially coming on the back of, as we've just said, with How I Met Your Mother, the kind of frustration of that show going nowhere, over people putting in a lot of time to a show that ended up where it started.
Yeah,
coming back in and going, hey, we can do the cool stuff they did, and then giving away the kind of what your cliffhanger is for each episode of what's coming next.
Yeah, it reeks of ignorance.
I see how you've rewritten, you've got an idea, but it's also like, hey, we didn't learn anything from that previous show. Let's go again.
Well, they learned a couple of things. They learned a couple of things. Number one is the narrator is going to be alone in a room with a typewriter so that we will not be beholden to footage that we shot 9 years ago just because the actors might grow up.
They learned all the shit things.
Yeah.
They learned to not commit to any particular type of theory or spine or whatever you want to call it. Like, they have no vision for that show.
Yeah. And I wonder if it had been picked up, if that last moment where we reveal who the dad is would have still been there. But then you'd have to rework the entire series because she admits in the in her letter to Cricket that Gavin is not her father, because apparently before this like deathbed confession letter from Sally Javits, her daughter or Cricket, I believe it's a daughter, didn't know that she was married before. So that means Gavin's not the father. Take him off the list. Then we're introduced to Danny, but it can't be Danny because he's her brother. And then we're introduced to Todd, and it can't be Todd because Todd is gay. Yeah. So the only heterosexual,
the most stereotypically gay man ever.
Yeah. I don't.
You mean Mitch from How? Yeah, sorry.
From How I Met Your Modern Family.
Yeah, from How I Met Your Modern Family.
How I Met Your Modern Family.
Really borrowing again from what was popular in the zeitgeist at the time to create this show, and then also going back to what we talked about in Why Fidelity at the 32-minute mark in our episode from 2 years ago, we're like, oh, we have to make any man in the show who we don't want to be a potential romantic partner for the main character, either related to her or gay. And then to see that in this, I'm like, oh, good. We haven't learned anything from 2014 when we did How I Met Your Dad going into High Fidelity. Like, maybe you just write characters who are platonic friends. Everybody doesn't need to be a potential romance. People are going to ship whoever they're going to ship, people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's How I Met Your Dad. I don't need to spend too much more time on this particular thing because there was nothing. First of all, nobody can see it, and thirdly, like the lessons they learned from all of TV, but mostly How I Met Your Mother, are all the wrong ones. They basically shove a bunch of shit in there that they think people want to see every Thursday night, and they're hoping that it's going to be the thing that lands. And anybody that watches it instantly knows, no, it's not working, which is why it never gets picked up.
Yeah, and that's
the one thing that.
No, go.
The thing that hit me after getting past the fact that, while you may have given a lovely reason to the fact they've used the word dad, it's the wrong word. If you're coming off How I Met Your Mother, it is How I Met Your Father. That's just logic. Follows that thing. If it was How I Met Your Mom, it would be How I Met Your Dad. That's fine, but it wasn't. And then they made these characters that are meant to complement each other, but it seems like they're just all stood around waiting for their next forced stereotypical joke line. Like, there was no it didn't seem to gel. That's one thing you can give the guys on How I Met Your Mother. They seemed to actually like each other, and they got on and they bounced off each other really well.
Well,
Whereas
I think that's probably due to the fact that they had somebody at the helm that is a friggin' god when it comes to television directing. Pamela Fryman, notably, Devin was the one that pointed this out, so I'm going to give him full credit. It is the one thing that we are going to talk about today that is not directed by Pamela Fryman.
Yes.
That is very true.
Yeah, you can
including even the show I know you said you didn't like, and that's because you didn't watch all of the episodes like I asked you to, but that's fine. It's
I was told to watch the pilot, and I watched
you
the
said
pilot,
at least watch the pilot. That was
I did say the pilot, and you don't have to watch anymore. I understand that it is a guilty pleasure of mine.
Well,
anyway.
Sejin, why, if it's a pleasure, should you be guilty about it?
Yes, to quote that show itself.
See, we watched it.
I mean,
I'm not wearing a
yes,
T-shirt with my name on it, but
filled with warmth that you quoted the show at me after telling me you didn't like it. So, like, I'm not enjoying this part, guys. But anyway, but it's the one thing that we've watched today that is not directed by Pamela Fryman, and I don't think that's a weird coincidence. Like, there's no chemistry at all in that show, and I can't speak to the creative process on it because it didn't get picked up, so I don't really have like an IMDb page to go to or anything like that. But like,
actually, it has an IMDb page, and that's when I learned that failed pilots are categorized as TV movies.
Oh,
yeah, I saw that. I was like, oh, that's one-off 20-minute long movie.
Yeah. So there's a lot of them because Pamela Fryman, while she wasn't a part of How I Met Your Dad, directed 3 other TV movies in 2014 that are all pilots that didn't get picked up. So it's an interesting thing I learned about the television industry. And as far as the creative side for How I Met Your Dad, to kind of like put this one in the ground and finish it, first of all, no one from How I Met Your Mother seems to be involved in it. It seems like it is completely CBS saying, we know this one is ended, but we want to keep the money train rolling. Mm-hmm. So they found people who I guess they thought sounded like similar voices in television to try to create their own Frankenstein version of How I Met Your Mother. It's actually probably why they couldn't call it How I Met Your Father, because I wouldn't be surprised if Carter Bays and Thomas, that they had maybe copyrighted the term if they wanted to do a sequel or an anthology. So How I Met Your Dad is probably what's available. Again, this is all conjecture, but when you look at the fact that nobody is involved with How I Met Your Dad from How I Met Your Mother, that starts to fall into place. But then it also kind of feels like whoever was working on How I Met Your Dad, they made it their goal to make it fail spectacularly.
Are you calling a producer's-esque idea behind the season of How I Met Your Dad?
Well, it wouldn't be an episode if we didn't reference the producers in some way.
I love this, but also, I mean, you have to think about the idea that like yes, okay, so Pamela Fryman, for anybody that doesn't know, has been involved in any television that you have watched since like the early 90s, right? Like she does a couple of things of like Golden Girls or something like that in like the early 90s, and then all of a sudden she ends up being one of the major directors on like Frasier, and like it's just gangbusters going forward. Like she touches stuff and it just rocks. So How I Met Your Mother, like she directs a couple of the earlier episodes of that and ends up becoming one of the main directors and producers and blah blah blah. She also directs How I Met Your Father and all that. There's this I forget where I was going now, but there's this idea that like she has 3 failed pilots that year, but she's working, right?
Right.
And so you look at somebody like her and you say that because she's clearly successful, clearly good at what she does, 3 failed pilots, you have to start to wonder, well, what's the average? Because if I direct 10 shows before one gets picked up as a regular, even then I'm not directing every episode, right?
I mean, that's 3 failed pilots in 2014, but also she did all of season 9 of How I Met Your Mother. Yeah. Like she directed, and that makes sense because it was supposed to be a season that took place over 48 hours. Right. So you wouldn't want to be changing the director up while you're doing it. Yeah. But most importantly, she did the finale of How I Met Your Mother. And I'm not mad at the direction of that episode. I'm mad at the script.
Yeah, well,
So
right. The concepts so that have to be there. But then, so to the idea that How I Met Your Dad kind of just falling on its face, and maybe it was supposed to, yeah, maybe it was. Like, maybe it was just a project that like CBS was like, well, we have to give this a shot, and like. You know, at the end of the day, office work is office work. You're a scriptwriter for CBS. You're just in a cubicle somewhere, depending on what level you're at. You're not everybody gets to like live in a mansion and get to write like episodes of fucking like television and then like live off of one episode for the rest of their life, right? So this idea being that like it's just a project that they tried and it just didn't work. So like I want to make sure that we just kind of level the ground here and not say like we're making a huge deal out of the fact that they tried this and it failed. They didn't try it. They did their due diligence in seeing if they could make it work, realized they couldn't, and didn't put it out there. Like, so kudos to whoever's in charge of the machine, because the right decision was made.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, as much as I enjoy it, I don't think Greta Gerwig gets to go on to have her Academy Award success with things like Lady Bird and Little Women if she gets picked up to play Sally Javits in How I Met Your Dad, even for one season.
Yeah, and I think it kind of shows in the fact that we haven't seen Josh Radnor go on to do much more. Or, well, he's done things, but he's not having that kind of success because he is Ted. It's the issue of anyone who gets a long-running season lead part, is that that's what they're seen as for the rest of their career. And it's, you know, if you can fight your way out of that, then well done to you. Or you bounce from long-running TV show to next long-running TV show in the David Boreanaz style of, you know, Angel to Bones to SEAL Teams.
SEAL Team, yeah. That man will never not work, and I love him for it.
Which totally took the Designated Survivor route with Bags of Dicks now that it's on Paramount Plus.
Nice.
Oh, we're allowed to swear? Fantastic.
Yeah, man. It's funny to me that you're talking about the idea of the guy that can never be kind of seen as anything but his television role at a time where, in a show where we have to acknowledge that we just lost Bob Saget, right? And talk about a guy that had like this weird, not within himself. It wasn't a split personality within himself, but like a split idea of who he was as a person in this society, right? Because you have a generation of people that just know him as Danny Tanner and know him as the America's Funniest Home Video guy. They don't have any idea who he is in his other life as a stand-up comedian. So like a lot of stuff has been coming out from his actual friends and family over the last couple of weeks because of his passing, and a lot of it is a lot of his stand-up work and a lot of his dirtier realm, like himself, and a lot of people that didn't know him that way being like, I don't know if I want to remember him this way, and a lot of people are like, you mean the way he was? Like, it's just the way he was. So it's just really
his character in Entourage.
Yeah.
What character? He played himself.
Exactly. You mean him in Entourage?
Yeah. But that idea being that like this is a show that had like the golden child of exactly that problem. So you can totally see somebody like a Josh Radnor feeling like and possibly being dealt with that way. I will also point out that I don't think Josh Radnor's much of anything that to like become a star. I don't know. I don't have like real issues with the way that the guy handles himself, but some of the interviews that he has given, especially about the way that he was kind of treated towards the end of How I Met Your Mother, has felt really kind of whiny. I mean, like, I don't know. Part of it is that it's hard for me to wrap my head around him getting kind of some of the heat that we see a lot of people in Hollywood nowadays getting with Twitter and stuff like that. Like think of like the people that worked on Star Wars and how legitimately like people had to leave like the internet for like months because they were just getting violent threats and things like that. And maybe it got to that level with the end of How I Met Your Mother. Maybe that's one of the earlier examples of it that I'm just not aware of just because I wasn't as tuned in at the time. But like the way that he kind of rides that and acts like he's kind of going to be the spokesman for people in that position. More than once I've heard him talk like he did in that moment where he talked about how people don't like endings at the end of the Game of Thrones, because he also had like he had some indie movie come out like a couple of years or maybe even just a year after the end of How I Met Your Mother, and it didn't do well, and he blamed exactly this idea that people could only see him as Ted Mosby as like the reason that his movie didn't do well. And it's like, I don't know, man, like there's a lot of people nowadays that are like super on board with the whole reinventing yourself after the major project. And if you couldn't win over that crowd, Just like own up to it. We watched Not Another Teen Movie a couple of weeks ago, and he shows up, right? And Devin's first reaction was, "Oh no, this guy." And like, yeah, exactly. It's not Ted Mosby, man.
Yeah, he's playing Ted Mosby in Not Another Teen Movie 4 years before he's going to be playing Ted Mosby on How I Met Your Mother. It's just it's just the way that he carries himself and the type of actor that he is. And again, I don't want to levy anything against him. He's working. I've certainly never done anything in Hollywood, let alone 9 years of a successful sitcom. So, he's better off than me in that one. There's something about Josh Radnor that doesn't gel with me. And by playing Ted Mosby, who did something pretty despicable at the end of that series, you're not making any friends or influencing any people with that.
No.
Is just how it goes.
I think there's the whole thing of being a victim of your own success, and that, yes, he has done a very successful, long-running TV series and probably done very well financially out of it. So he's probably completely comfortable and has no issue living. But if it's somebody who loves what he does and wants to keep acting and do more, it's very hard to come back. As you've seen with half the guys who were in Friends, only a few of them really have kicked on and done well and kept going. Whereas a lot of them they all still, live and do stuff. And as we talked about just earlier, Scream coming back is one of the things that Courtney Cox managed to do outside of Friends that went well. It's not easy for a lot of them to come back and do stuff, and it ends up, hopefully you tack into something like a Scream or, Jason Segel was good because he managed to do a lot more because I guess he's just a nice guy who's good at doing what he does, and people want to work with him.
Yeah.
To maybe be the difference.
Yeah, well, no, that's exactly it. You look at a guy like Neil Patrick Harris, who had a Broadway career in addition to his acting career, so he had someplace to go. You had Allison Hannigan, who had a long career before How I Met Your Mother, and she was golden after. She was producing stuff by the time she was leaving How I Met Your Mother. She didn't even want to be on screen anymore, and that sort of. And then Colby Smulders.
Fun, Allison Hannigan hosts the Penn and Teller show on the CW, and she has admitted, "I just do this for fun." I don't need the money. I like hanging out 100%. With the guys.
And Colby Smulders had been picked up by the MCU, right? At that point, she was I don't know what I got, but I at least got Marvel, right? And there's some people that like me in this role, so I think I'm good with this. Thanks.
And she continued, right? She was in Far From Home. She wasn't in any of the Phase 4 stuff, but she was in something as recent as 2019.
Yeah.
It's not like she had one role in the MCU and that was it. She had that. She also has done shows on Netflix, and every role that she's played after Robin Scherbatsky is very different from Robin Scherbatsky.
Right.
So she did it right. And you mentioned the Friends, Will, but really the only one to me who I think hasn't went on to any grander success is David Schwimmer. And
that's actually a misunderstanding of Schwimmer now, because as a director and a writer, overseas, he works nonstop and is a huge success. It's just kind of, we don't think of him because we don't see him on screen anymore.
Right. Where the other ones you do. Everybody else, you think about it, they do show up on screen. But I was gonna make the connection between Ross and Ted being sort of cut from the same type of television DNA.
No, I'm not gonna let Josh Radnor get away with this one and act like this. Now is the time when TV stars are just not recognized outside, because I think that's what it is for me. Is that he is coming out of the golden age of television, and a huge factor of that was people on TV that were amazing and deserved to be making movies, and people in movies that were so good that they deserved their own TV show. That back and forth is part of the DNA of television now, and part of the DNA of filmmaking now. The way that you bump your movie that is coming out in a couple of years is you make sure that you're hiring a guy that showed up on a TV show this year. There's this idea that he couldn't move back and forth is definitely one that existed before. As I pointed out, it was one of the biggest things that I think is kind of really shown up in all of this Bob Saget stuff that's gone on since he's passed away, is people not being able to reconcile that kind of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But that was the 90s, and I'll even give him maybe in the early 2000s. But by the time he's coming off of How I Met Your Mother, he is primed to be right in that first batch of guys that can make that successful transition and make it rock, and he just doesn't make it, and that's fine. Not everybody does, and it's just weird that his attitude after that show has made me realize how much of Ted Mosby is just him.
Yeah. I don't disagree. You also need to think about the fact
yeah.
that the cinematic landscape, rom-coms have all but disappeared. And what else would you see Josh Radnor in?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not ready to watch him as an action hero. Like, so where else does he go in 2014? Where, like, apparently Marvel movies are the only things that are getting made anymore.
He needed a role like what's his nuts there in Juno that plays the older
Jason
dude
Bateman?
that she falls for. Jason Bateman. He needed that role though. Like that is what Josh Radnor needs. Is he needs something where he can be in that kind of indie movie, not necessarily in the lead role though, like picking up the slack in the lower scenes, and like that is where I think he shines. Because on How I Met Your Mother, where he shines is when he's being the good friend. When and he's not always a good one, but when he's being the friend in the room. So when he's there for Marshall, or when he's there for Barney, or when he's there for Robin, those are the moments when Ted is like fun to be around because the focus isn't on him.
Yeah, I mean the really weird thing about the whole idea of Ted Mosby is I don't think he's the leading man in a romantic comedy. in How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah, no.
Like, the reason why I care about the show and the reason why How I Met Your Mother really grabbed me was someone like Barney Stinson, who was confident and fun to be around. And in a really weird way, and you guys, rake me across the corals for saying it, but like, he validated a lot of the ways I wanted to live in the world. Like, I want to say hi to everybody who has a name tag because your name is right there. And that's something that Barney Stinson did. And I'm like, well, I'm going to start doing it because TV said I can. And just like him, like being the guy who's going to go out and pick up chicks, but also like, I also love to play laser tag. Like, Barney Stinson was like, yeah, Devin, you can live your life the way you want to live your life and fuck everybody else. And that meant a lot to me.
This is just a wonderful, wonderful look into your psyche right now
I'm
for
just
everybody.
being honest. I don't like.
I know you
You've
are.
gone, hey, who's the role model I want to base my life around?
Oh,
Fine.
yeah. If those are my two choices, then yes, fine, Barney Stinson.
Yeah,
But,
the one.
It could be anyone from the
the
How I Met Your franchise. Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
The captain would win.
So, can we talk about How I Met Your Father?
Yeah, I
Because,
think it's time for How I Met Your Father time because it's the new one, and
and all of this stuff that I am feeling right now about How I Met Your Mother, right? So I started watching today, and I was kind of really not on board. Like I was on board for the episode, obviously. I wasn't on board for watching more How I Met Your Mother after 2 episodes. I honestly had a hard time getting through the second one. With
yeah,
like
that
the whole...
second episode is not great. Taste of Liberty is really where that show starts to shine.
Oh man, the whole bit that he does in the second episode about like how he's gonna like neg Robin at the party the whole night is just fucking gross. Anyway, so watch that. Watch How I Met Your Dad. You all heard my feelings on that. Get to How I Met Your Father, and it has a battle. So I kind of need to go back and rewatch these episodes because I need to kind of recalibrate. But after everything else that I had watched, this show had a fight to fight, and it did pretty damn good. I'm not quite sure if I'm ready to say that, like, I'm totally on board like I was after, say, the pilot of How I Met Your Mother the first time I saw it. But I'm definitely on board to watch more episodes. And part of the reason for that is all of this stuff that I've been bitching about for the last, like, hour is that idea that it's not that it's not there in this new one, but it's addressed in ways that it's never addressed in the original. Because that's part of the problem, is that part of the reason why we all hate Ted Mosby and we all hate Ross is we see parts of ourselves in those characters, but what we don't see in those characters are the parts of ourselves that stop us from being like that all the time. Right? So it's like, I get where this dude's coming from, but I hate that he doesn't have that part of him to tell him to shut up. And that sucks. In those characters, that is more of what I saw on display in How I Met Your Father, is a lot more of that kind of attitude of like, I get where this character's coming from, but man, I would hate myself for feeling this way right now. And then all of a sudden the character talks about how they hate how they're feeling that way. And you're just like, okay, all right, you got me on that one. Like, that happened more than once watching those 2 episodes of that show.
Definitely on board. I felt that the issues we've talked about, the things that, like as you just very nicely said, Stephen, you see yourself in these characters, but they just don't have that voice telling them to stop. Mm-hmm. This felt like How I Met Your Father. The characters felt like real people. It felt like they had art and they had story and they had a conscience and stuff going on in their life that we're not going to see all of it straight away. But, I mean, it felt like the only one out of the How I Met Your Mother pilot and the How I Met Your Dad and then this pilot where I was like, this feels like a show where you've got me from episode 1. It wasn't like, I was like, maybe I'll give it a couple more and see if I fall into the series. I was like, no, I legitimately care about how we got to the point where that guy proposed and now it's on the internet and he's that guy.
Yeah.
Or how she, you know, the 87 Tinder date she's been on before this one and how they went and what happened, why they weren't this guy who does the great thing in life and moves to Australia.
Yeah. That is one of those moments, by the way, right, where she talks about the idea that she's been on these Tinder dates, and then she feels the need to talk about how she doesn't sleep with every guy there, and then she feels the need to correct herself by saying, well, it's not that every guy there, it's not that you can't do that, and then it turns into that, right?
Yeah,
and like that bit, I like that
brilliant.
bit. It's like it's woke and dumb and silly, but like that is sitcom comedy for me in 2022.
It's woke and dumb and silly, but it also makes sense. Because she doesn't really know this guy.
Right.
It's also like a stranger. Yeah. So.
But it's that woke, dumb, silly thing that we all do, where you say something and you go, not that there's a problem with that. You can do that if you want. That's your life. You have fun with it.
Yeah.
You do that because you do say something that you go, oh, I kind of just exposed maybe a thought that I shouldn't have had, or a thought where I'm like, oh, this guy's not going to want to talk to me if I said I slept with 100 people. But not that you don't want to sleep with 100 people. Do you want? You have fun with it. So. It's that moment, and you go, we've all been there. You've all said that thing where you're like even last night, I was watching the tennis with my partner, and they cut to some guys in the crowd, and she went, oh, that'll be the other guy's coach. And I was like, are you saying that because he also looks Japanese? And she's like, oh, no, I didn't mean that. It wasn't because of that. I was like, no, it clearly is his coach. He's standing up shouting. He's getting definitely his coach. But I'm going to call you out on it because it's funny.
You asshole.
That's beautiful.
Watching
tennis.
Going, oh, I'm racist. I was like, no, you're not racist. It's fine. Weirdly, then, 10 minutes later, she goes, oh, where's that guy from? He looks Russian. I was like, he is, because there's a Russian flag next to him on the scoreboard. But what do you mean by he looks Russian?
Well, I mean, he has a Russian flag next to his name, Will. What are you implying?
Yeah. I mean, his name's Medvedev. It wasn't a big step away from where he might be from.
Man. Yeah, but like,
we've all done those
these are the
bits,
right?
It was a relatable moment.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And that was one of the other things that I think really kind of got me. Like, it's the spice on the How I Met Your Mother stew is that it really kind of does understand the moment in which it exists. What is it? Like the late 2000s, right? Like 2007, 2000.
What are we talking about? How I Met Your Mother's 2005.
2005.
Yeah.
Like so it gets that late 2000s vibe down right in terms of the attitudes, the all of that sort of stuff, and the conversations. So it did feel like, unlike watching Friends, which I never connected with on a personal level, but like I liked watching people with turkeys on their heads, right? Like that was funny. But this was the first time I was laughing because they were doing things that I could relate to. So it also hit at the right time in my life because of that. And How I Met Your Father has managed to capture that bit really well, in that like I am laughing at these bits because I totally am on that plane with her in that moment when she starts stumbling over trying to be correct with this person, this stranger in the street.
Yeah. I am going to say something though, and it really links into episode 2 of How I Met Your Father. So sorry if I'm going out of order on this one.
No,
but there's that moment where they're making drip coffee, and like that's a thing that happens in the world. I get it. But it also said to me, Sophie is 29 years old. We know that Sophie is 29 years old because on her Tinder profile, her age is displayed, right? It's not like Mother or Dad where they say I was 27 years old so that we have that to go off of, right? The only time that her age is revealed is when she's about to deactivate her Tinder profile. So if she's 29, she was born in 1992, right? She was born in 1991. Yeah, 93. I'm sorry. Math is hard right now because I
went the wrong way. It's fine.
It just went the wrong way with it. So 93, right? So she's like Dale's age. Like Dale is the person who's closest in age from all of us. And it's like, Dale doesn't make drip coffee, and Dale didn't even know that they were drip coffee cups. She's like, why are they taking out 4 cups for 2 cups of coffee? And I was the one who told her, like, well, it's drip coffee. Like, that's a thing that's happening now. It's very hip and new. So there's this weird thing from the creative standpoint on the show that very much Sophie and Valentina and all of these characters are millennials, right? Of all the shows that we've talked about, this is us seeing ourselves on screen for real, right?
For real, right,
like as much as I saw myself in Barney Stinson, not the ladies' man part of it, but like the confidence and the swagger. Like he was still at the time like 18 years older than me. Like it wasn't like I wasn't seeing myself in that character. It was just like, if I could grow up to be like that, I'm gonna be okay with that, and I'm gonna start on that path now, right? Where this show, it's supposed to reflect the world that we live in and who we are in the world, and there are just so many times where you see that infantilization of millennials that is kind of annoying on the internet,
right?
Because everybody treats us like we're the Gen Zers who are on TikTok and doing all this crazy stuff that you see on social media. But really, we're the people who are trying to get mortgages for houses.
Yes.
It isn't acceptable to get a mortgage with.
Yeah, for sure. But I think the idea that their story, as told in those first 2 episodes, is clearly going to be, and I say there, I mean Sophie and what's her friend's
Valentina.
name? Valentina. So Sophie and Valentina's like conversation with each other about how they're right on the verge of needing to grow up, and they're fighting it, and they're at the tail end of it. I mean, like that's
You're thinking of How I Met Your Dad. You're thinking of How I Met Your Dad.
No, I'm not. I'm definitely thinking of How I Met Your Father, and about how she has the moment where she goes, I know the thing I should have done, but I don't want to do that. I just want to take care of me, when they're both sitting on the side of the street.
Oh, in the second episode? Yeah, I got you.
But like overarching, their character archetypes are the 2 party girls where everybody else around them has grown up and they haven't yet. That is the archetype that they are. Not so hardcore, but like it's what 2 broke girls wrote to the end of its days.
Exactly.
Like the idea of just being these 2 women that actually are more mature than they let on, but they don't want to let the world know that, because then they'll be responsible for something in their life, right? And that's the bit. That's what it's going to be with them, and I'm down for that.
I'm totally down for that.
But that idea being that if this is the beginning of their journey, they have to be that age. They have to be on the lower end of the millennial. They have to be infantile. That has to be present, because like we have only seen 1 episode of what potentially could be a 9-season show, right?
True.
If they're still like this at season 8, let's have this conversation again. But I'm not going to knock them for being too like out of sync right now.
I mean, it just seems like it's that representation of what people think a millennial is.
Sure.
It's more that discussion. It's that discussion, oh my God, Juno talks like teens these days. And it's like, no, Juno talks like what a woman in her 30s thinks teenagers are talking like these days. Like, I don't know. It rang a little bit hollow. There was a moment in the first episode where I wrote down, I'm too old for this show. And it was because of like the thing that they're talking about. And I'm like, but really, I'm not too old for this show, because these people are in my age group, right?
I guess
on the form where you tick your age on the box on the form, we're in the same group.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also live with 2 29 and one that was 29 and just turned 30 literally in the last month. Like I know a couple of women that are in this position right now in their lives and having those exact same conversations. So like it just rang very true for me. Like a lot of the conversations that they were having, and they also happen to have drip coffee in this house. I don't know.
Well, the girls in How I Met Your Father do not know how to make drip coffee. Well, that was so disappointing.
Well, and that was that's the joke, right?
Yeah.
Is like they're doing it
as
like a mature thing to do, because they're gonna get their shit together, they're gonna get the life together, and then she like can't do it.
Well, it's because they didn't wait long enough.
No, at all, not at all.
No. What I think is an interesting point saying about the age groups and how it came. So when you look at the beginning of How I Met Your Mother in 2005, we're all 18, 19, 20, kind of around this time. And it's very much a point where these characters are slightly older than us and going through things that we haven't gone through, or things we haven't even thought about, perhaps. And looking at it from that point of view, we outgrew the characters pretty quickly by just being more mature than them, even though we were younger.
Yeah.
And you look back on things, as we said, like, you've got that voice that tells you when to stop, and they don't. We all grew quicker, whereas now, looking at How I Met Your Father and going back, you're like, oh, this is only a few years ago for us. And these kind of things are conversations that would have been had. And we have friends who are this age who have these conversations. It feels much more, maybe not more relatable, but something that definitely I can be like, yeah, this all seems legitimate. Like, I know this. Whereas with How I Met Your Mother, it was like, by now, not to say I've grown up and I'm a better person than these people, but we know where the line is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they never seem to.
Oh my God, when I was 27, I would never steal a blue French horn and go to a girl who's like, have a nice night's apartment. Like, he is a psycho. He's a psycho. The fact that Robin became friends with that group of people after that display, it's a little crazy. Especially when we then learned that he returned for her again, slop-ass drunk, and stole her welcome mat. Like...
Well, it seems like Ted Mosley's a character who's watched a lot of Ben Affleck
joke.
moments.
Yeah.
And thought, that's how you talk to women. I will do my monologue at them, and that'll be fine. Everything will work out because Ben Affleck did it.
God, I mean, and we were mocking Ben Affleck moments even back then, Will. That like, oh, we could go for a Ben Affleck moment. Yeah, but those don't work in real life. You look like a crazy person.
Yeah, it's
yeah.
just...
You kind of stop talking. I'm going to tell you everything, and then it'll be fine.
And you're just gonna fall in line with the world that I have laid out for you because I got to speak for. I basically filibustered you into loving me. Is what it is, right? Look at that. We're prescient.
So this does feel
you
like...
opened the episode with that speech from Ted Mosley.
I had to. It's what an episode starts with. A really gross speech from the main character you shouldn't be emulating.
And so like this, it feels like there's something going on in How I Met Your Father that was probably there in the early days of How I Met Your Mother. I think that's what it is for me, right? Is that idea being like, it has the same promise and the same potential. So I guess at the beginning of the episode when I said I wasn't quite sure how I feel about it yet, it's because I know where that has the potential to go, and I don't know if I really want to get invested like that again. And like, so this show has some big shoes to fill, and they're not like good ones. They're not kind ones. Like they need to make sure that they either don't make big promises, and I think they've learned that, because as I mentioned earlier, the big kind of moment in this, the reveal at the end of the episode of who the father may or may not be, is actually like this shotgun, like, could be anybody moment, to the point where it was so wide open that honestly, if they introduced somebody else that wasn't even here, I feel like they could get away with something with me with this. They make it pretty clear. Kim Cattrall, hey Kim Cattrall, this is where you are. We were wondering.
And just like that,
yeah,
Samantha showed up in How I Met Your Father.
Right, she does say that's the night that the father was met. So like, I feel like they have tied themselves in that way. It's just that they left the door open wide enough that they clearly have the ability to move around a lot more. So another lesson learned from earlier, right?
Well, another lesson learned in the fact that we didn't see the kid, and the voice of the child seems to be a composite of all four voices of the potentials that they detail at the end. But this is the moment where I reveal that the pilot I watched the most in preparation for this is the pilot for How I Met Your Father, looking to see if there was another male character that she met in that night that could potentially be the father. The bouncer doesn't come till the next episode.
Second episode,
yeah. So I mean, there are a bunch of other guys at Sid's proposal, and we're not with them the whole time. So maybe she spoke to them in like a yellow umbrella sort of. Ooh, it'll make sense because I met him at the proposal. We just didn't get to see that part. But honestly, they've pretty much tied themselves to Christopher Lowell being the father, right? And we haven't talked about Christopher Lowell's Jesse yet, but I'm so on board because I watched a little show on Hulu last week before this show premiered called Enlisted, and I fell in love with Christopher Lowell as an actor. not even knowing he was going to be in How I Met Your Father. And he's playing the same character as he played in Enlisted. So
I don't know if they have. I don't know. I mean, I think there's options for what they could do in terms of moving forward, because the other thing that they're doing is again, much like How I Met Your Mother, and kind of coming down to our level to talk about like the world as it currently is, right? Like they're introducing a lot of newer stuff to the world. The idea that there are people of color that are their friends and things like that. Woo! like
well, that came. That idea was big for me when we said they didn't show the kid.
Yeah,
it doesn't fix them into look, with Ted it was like, oh well, he's gonna theoretically end up with a white person of his race because look at the kid.
Yeah, there's like a lot of yeah. So they do, they make some moves to make it as vague as possible that make it feel a little bit better. I like I said, I'm still kind of parse out how I feel about it, because there's also a lot of really weird stuff. Like the first episode of How I Met Your Father, they need to lay a lot of groundwork in terms of exposition, and the way that they do it is this framing device of her getting into the Uber and like just unloading on these two people she's never met before. First of all, if I got into an Uber and there was a second guy there, nope. Especially if I'm a 29-year-old woman.
That's a good point. That's
I'm not. This wasn't part of me ordering an Uber. There being no thanks, guy.
I ordered Uber X, not Uber Pool. The fuck is going on?
Yeah, so that's was a weird thing for me. And then just the amount of unloading on strangers, and that's always a thing in these moments where hey, we need to get a lot of stuff out. So this person's just going to talk to a friend, and you're just this feels like oversharing at some point. Even if it's somebody they know, it can sometimes feel like that, right? But anyway, that kind of stuff comes in, and that feels really weird to me. So the first episode was really kind of a back and forth for me of just watchable but not hooked, right? It wasn't until the second episode when they go to the bar and it has this really weird atmosphere. Yeah, I was gonna get into FOMO. No photos at FOMO. But the idea being that they go to this weird bar, they're all together. You get to learn a lot more about how kind of disconnected from reality Charlie is. My secret kind of love on this show.
Charlie's my least favorite character, which makes me really sad, but I'm glad that somebody loves Charlie.
He was the only character that I was having any fun with at first, and then eventually it started with the other ones. But it took a while for everybody else.
Sharaj Sharma, I'm a huge Sharaj Sharma fan from Dear God. So it's all these, for me, the people I know almost everybody who's in the show except for Valentina and Charlie, and it's just I'm okay though, because Valentina, I was right on board. That Selena t-shirt was amazing. But Charlie they didn't do enough to develop him in the first episode. And then the weird development in the second episode, kind of one of my issues with Pretty Smart. I'm going to be completely honest with you, which is
so that was the other Pamela Fryman project I had everybody check out because Netflix had a 10-episode drop of a Pamela Fryman show called Pretty Smart this year, all about a girl that is got an MBA and all this shit, and she ends up living with her who she thinks is dumb sister and her dumb friends. But are they really smarter than her? They kind of are in some moments. It's a weird show. I really liked it though. It's only 10 episodes long, and the second half is coming out soon, so go check it out.
I mean, I'll watch more, but I think what was cringy for me was the stupidity reached minstrelsy level. I'm not comfortable with people this stupid living in the world.
That's fair. That's totally fair. I'm not gonna lie to you. That is kind of the bit, but the bit is how when they are that stupid and then all of a sudden they stumble into being the smartest one in the scene is that's the joke of the whole show. So if you're not on board for that, I totally get it. I'm just warning you now that you probably don't want to get too deep into that show.
I mean, it's 10 episodes, and I love Emily Osment, and really
Emily shows up at one point.
What's
just
that?
Saying. Ming-Na Wen shows up at one point.
Ooh, I love Ming-Na Wen.
Oh, yeah.
but yeah, no, it's I love Emily Osment, and really watching the just myriad of characters that she has portrayed just over the last 5 years. Yeah. She had never played a character like Chelsea in Pretty Smart before. Like, she's always kind of been like a drug addict or like a really like everything put together but not like hyper educated person. So like seeing her portray this, like it just made me want to celebrate Emily Osment, but just the level of stupidity that they put on display was such Hollywood's idea of what makes a person stupid. And
I think that they go out of their way to tone that down as the series goes on.
I certainly hope so.
But I would say that if you didn't feel the same way, I don't really have an argument for you. So there, that is what it is. But sorry, go ahead.
That was my concern with the Charlie character. I mean, Tom Ainsley as Charlie in How I Met Your Father was I'd watched the way that I watched them. I went How I Met Your Mother 1 and 2, then I watched How I Met Your Dad. Then I watched Pretty Smart, and then I finished with How I Met Your Father. And I came into it having seen How I Met Your Dad and Pretty Smart. We did kind of, as you say, quite Hollywood forced stupidity, stereotypical character. Oh, this guy's an influencer, and all he talks about is social media. And well, if you're not on social media, how do you know how many likes you had? And these kind of lines. And then I saw Charlie in How I Met Your Father, and I was like, oh no, they've put in shirtless British guy to bring this character in it, and he's going to be the butt of the joke because he doesn't like the subway and he doesn't like things about New York, and that's going to be a running theme. And I got a little bit worried that was going to be, make me feel the same way as I did about Pretty Smart or How I Met Your Dad, in that there was no depth to this character. He was just, that's what he's going to be.
Yeah,
comic belief in the background.
It's definitely a huge possibility. It is a huge possibility. My faith is that in How I Met Your Mother, especially if you look at just the first season, right? There are so many changes in what characters. There's so many add-ons. They're not changes because characters never become something completely different than they were before. But things get added on to characters over time, and they become something wild by the end. I mean, Barney's the biggest example in the whole show, right? But also to that point, Allison Hannigan there, Lily, like Lily, famously, people have like completely like taken sides on whether or not they love who Lily becomes or hate who Lily becomes, because she becomes somebody very different by the end of that show, right? So like with all of that knowledge about what has happened in this type of series before, my hope is that they are smart enough to build that character out. But yeah, no promises, right? It's only 2 episodes of a show on Hulu that right now I think only has 10 episodes airing, right?
We'll have it until March 15th. A new episode every week through March 15th. So, I mean, we're probably going to talk about it again on the show. Also forgot that we were doing a show and it was just the 3 of us chilling out talking about TV again like we were in college. That felt pretty good just right now. But yeah, it's...
Isn't that the True podcast?
Yeah, that's exactly right. When we've transcended podcasting, that's when we're doing the True podcast. It's like Nirvana. We're Buddhists now. Sorry. Yeah, it's... I found it very hard to believe that Charlie had never, like, been on the underground. Like, his reaction that, like, oh, New York has subways, and it's like, there are subways in Britain. Aren't there?
But they met at London Fashion Week, and London is pretty heavily built around the tube.
Yeah.
Which is very similar to the New York subway.
I mean, I do get the impression that we're supposed to believe that he is like royalty, though, right? Like, is that not what I'm supposed to believe?
He's supposed to be like royalty because he was.
I don't know. How often do the princes get on the subway? Did that happen a lot? I was under the impression that was not the case, but maybe I'm mistaken.
Jude Law takes the subway quite a lot, but I wouldn't call him a prince.
It just felt so. It rang so hollow. And he's like, "Ooh, I want to go on a subway," and it's like, if you wanted to go on a subway, there's a pretty great train system where you're from.
Yeah. It's not, I mean, the other side of this is we are acting like the tube is the end-all be-all of train. It's got its issues.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm saying, is that, like...
Striking workers and whatnot. He might not have ever been on a subway before because it's not running half the time.
I mean, I don't know. I
mean, and then they talk about the subway trifecta of, the 3 things she sees, and you go, you can see all those things on the tube. It's no different. You get the wrong train going somewhere, you'll find all that stuff.
Yeah, like
you can talk about piss and shit on the show, Will. You don't have to hide behind.
Yeah, we say. Wait, I said finger a couple episodes ago.
Oh,
and here it is again.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was just very his character just seems to be the one that is just there for the joke, much like Robin's 5 dogs in the first episode, and then we're stuck with the fact that this character owns 5 dogs in an apartment building. So I really hope that, especially when the second episode is Valentina being like, I'm done with this toy, I want to throw it away. Like, I really enjoyed the fact that he's like, oh, I'm going to make some American friends and an American friend setup. And let's be honest, an American friend setup sounds wonderful. Because the thing I really dig about How I Met Your Father, and also I think what appealed to me the most about How I Met Your Mother in a weird way, is that How I Met Your Mother, more so than that you're going to find your forever love, what I picked away from that show was you're going to find your friends who become your like extended family. And I'm right here with my 2 brothers right now, right? And I met you at that time and we're still friends. Will and I somehow make it work despite the fact that he's in Australia. We haven't talked about Ian yet and we have to talk about Ian. And then we get to something like How I Met Your Father and the fact that neither one of these groups of people are like that big group of friends yet. Like, Sophie has Valentina and Jesse and Sid have each other. And then it's the collision of those 2 like duos that builds the friend group that has been the focal point of every other How I Met Your like series.
Right.
And that's very interesting to me because I feel like the big friend group has kind of gone the way of the dinosaur in modern culture. So like the way that reflects what's going on is very interesting to me.
Yeah, no, it also means
a lot of potential.
We learn who they are with them as they learn about each other. It's not like they've got all this wonderful shared history we're never going to really be a part of. Right. Yeah, you might find that, but Jesse and Sid will have their stuff, and Sophie and Valentina will have their things. But as a 4, I guess a 5 with Charlie
and Ellen. Don't forget Ellen.
There's that. Yeah, there's no actual like, oh, you guys remember that time we were all at college together and that funny thing happened, which I think they relied a lot on in How I Met Your Mother. Of that, like, hey, you remember those times we were all so cool doing this thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas with this, it's like, no, you guys don't have that, and we can all just, as an audience, learn with you why this guy is who he is and how it happened, because you're going to need to know the story as well.
Can we talk about for a second the fact that every time, hey, do you remember for How I Met Your Mother, that was Marshall, Lily, and Ted? So, like, it's kind of not surprising that Barney and Robin would, like, sort of grow because they're like, oh, we're just here like 2 fucks while they reminisce for 3 hours.
Yeah, right. Like, what are we gonna do? Let's go.
Let's fall in love, I guess.
Let's drink some scotch and see what happens.
Yeah.
But,
especially, when you consider that Barney and Robin have like tumultuous pasts. Like their pasts weren't exactly the best. So when these people are reminiscing about their great times that they got to have together, why don't we go do our own thing? It's it's something. Sorry.
No, so little tidbits from How I Met Your Father that I think we need to address. Like, first of all, you mentioned Ian, right? Like, they have this whole other character of Ian who they introduce as an outside possibility to be a father that is clearly not in the Friends group, at least not right now. Who knows? I mean, like, this is kind of the modern streaming like promise of television, is like you can say to an actor like, hey, show up for a couple of minutes in the first episode and then you're not going to be there for 3, but then you're going to be the guy for like the back half, right? Like you can make that promise to somebody because you're going to film 10 episodes in a row. You don't have to just like hope he sticks around till the end of the series if he's like, so this idea being that they introduce this character that they immediately send away. They kind of do the same thing with his fiance there. What was her name?
I don't remember her name.
But they introduced a fiance only to then have her run off. Oh, right.
So one of us should have remembered that.
Yeah. Maybe there's a reason I didn't. The idea being that that she gets shuffled off and Ian gets shuffled off. So there's this potential, this promise outside world like coming in and disrupting things that I really appreciate, because it doesn't feel like it's just a bubble of these guys in a particular area in New York and they don't understand anything outside of their bubble. They are legitimately recognizing like, no, like at any moment the world can change on you, and it could just be somebody showing up on a plane. Like, and it's like, fuck yeah, man. Like, okay, like the world seems very big. It's part of the reason that I said that I'm not entirely convinced it has to be somebody that they show in that montage at the end of that moment. The father, who the father is.
Right.
Because,
Well, I certainly hope it's somebody she met that night, though. Otherwise, she's lying to her son to build up drama.
Right. It has to be that, and it's probably going to be one of those guys. I'm not lying to myself and saying it like there's no chance it's them. I'm just saying that they've opened the door enough that if something buck wild happens and they have to introduce a character in season 3 and say this is your dad, sure, okay, like let's come up with some reason why. It's going to work a hell of a lot better than How I Met Your Mother did.
Well, let's look at the difference between How I Met Your Mother and How I Met Your Father. How I Met Your Father, we know that London exists. We know that Australia exists. We know that Iowa exists. We know that Ohio exists. It is not just New York, which, like, very much it is just New York in the first episode of How I Met Your Mother. And they don't really grow the world that much larger outside of the United States. Like,
you have, is it Nina that Barney dates for a while, who is slightly British?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, she's like, it's like, but then they go to like Philadelphia. Marshall is from Minnesota. Oh, I guess Robin and like Canada, but like Canada is treated like a mythic land where everything is
like
crazy.
It's
fucking Narnia.
Well, yeah, a bit more Minnesota up there.
Yeah. It's just, this show is very much like, no, we're going to try to reflect the real world. And they do a lot to do. Oh, LA exists as well, because that's where Hannah goes back to you know, do a lung transplant. And it also leaves me with questions like, why is Sid not a doctor if he met Hannah in med school? And like, not just like pre-med, like, I imagine he was in there. He was dissecting cadavers.
Yeah, I like that he owns the bar.
Yeah, scenic route.
Yeah, you fucking asshole.
Yeah.
But yeah, Pemberton's is a terrible name for a bar. But what I will say about Ian is fuck Ian. I'm just going to say fuck Ian. I don't want him to be the father. If he ends up being the father, I will feel very How I Met Your Mother about this series and how I felt in the end. Surrogate? I don't know. I really hate that he's not willing to put in the work to like try to make it work. Like, it's 14-hour time difference. And it's like, you know what? This girl ran to the airport for you. Like, first of all, don't meet her for dinner. Like, I just, everything that he does in it is just like kind of slimy. Like, oh, we'll meet for dinner. You could have told her that you're only in town for like apparently the night. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, that's a real harsh turnaround.
This is the conversation we can have. This feels like talking about How I Met Your Mother again, right?
Yeah,
like,
it
that's
does.
The other thing, right? Like, it's having these kinds of conversations of like, I hope it's not her because of this, or why I like it. like when Katy Perry showed up, I think there was an entire like table full of people just like shitting about
Britney Spears. When Britney Spears showed up, that was the Devon Decker Memorial Lounge. Some voices were raised that day. When Britney Spears was in an episode and dating Barney. It's like, so it inspires that whole thing. But it's really one of those things where, I mean, we're doing this podcast right now with somebody in Australia. And Will and I, again, it's not romantic or anything, but we're just friends. But it's one of those situations where, like, we work around the time difference. Yeah. I talk to him when he wakes up around 4:00 my time. And then we talk when I'm heading, like, it works. Like, we're still able to be friends. We live in 2022.
His other thing the other reason he gives as to why it won't work is he'll be on the ocean for a long time. Now, I'm pretty sure you were on the ocean for quite a long time, Devin, and we still managed to make that work as well.
Yeah, for a year, I worked on the ocean, and we were able to be friends. And that was before I had a smartphone.
Oh man,
that was before WhatsApp and things existed.
Yeah,
we made it work.
We still make it work. Like, I don't know. It's just one of those weird things.
Here right now. I mean, sure, I should probably be at work right now, but we're all here right now and we're talking. It's fine.
Yeah, and even though Will's not able to be an everyday part of the Save Report, he's still part of the Save Report. He's still part of the Save Report family. Like, it's, I don't know. It just felt so weird when he's like, I'm moving to Australia for work. And I'm like, my heart. And I'm like, yeah, but they can make it work, right? Will and I are still friends. Will and I have been friends across oceans for, like, what, coming on 13 years now? Is that the math?
Yeah, 2008.
Yeah.
2008, 2009, I was at college. So, yeah, it's all gone from there. And it's like, I mean, I know we're not trying to have a child together.
Right,
but,
exactly.
Well, not yet, anyway.
But let's also be honest about the fact that if we were trying to have a child together in those 13 years, I think one of us would have made the effort to try to, you know, have us live in the same area. Right? Like, it's just one of those situations.
Let's go a step further with us lot. Although I live in Australia now, I am originally from England, which is not the same country as you guys anyway.
Right.
They have the idea that he has the ability to be in the same country as her whenever he wants. I can't just come and live in the US because I felt like it.
True. Very true.
I have to get visas. It's tricky, whereas he's like, oh, it's not going to work because I'm in Australia now. But you'll be going back to the same place at some point.
Yeah. It doesn't. This is not the way that it works. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a flimsy excuse for him to maybe just kind of bounce out too, right? Like, it could just be that he's just not into it. It was just a Tinder date, like. Right, and that's the thing.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, just be honest about it. Don't be like, oh, maybe someday, and don't send me Don't continue my Jason Momoa joke, right? Hi, Will. Hi, Devin. We had a little inside joke like that. And if Will was like, we're not friends anymore, I wouldn't send him a hi, Will picture.
I love this because this is now turning into literally dialogue from the show, from episode 2.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
It works.
The other thing we got to talk about is the only definitive tie-in to the original show.
This is a good place to end it.
A really good one.
Yeah.
A very good tie-in. I was very happy that this is what they went for.
As soon as I saw the door, I knew, man. I was so happy.
Well, I was wondering if they were going to be like in the same building. So they walk into the boys' apartment in the end, and it is the old apartment. And literally make a joke about getting the old apartment. Make a joke about getting it from an old couple, from the old law firm, right? And then the swords are there. Like, that felt good. Yeah, like that felt good to me. I don't know how I feel about the idea that, I think, Devin, you were the one that introduced this earworm to me, is the idea that she might be Barney's daughter. Maybe, possibly. They kind of reveal at the end of is it season 2 or episode 2?
It's episode 1 that her mother is a party girl and her father was never in the picture.
Yeah, father wasn't involved.
The problem there, though, is Barney in 1993, was he sleeping around and getting people pregnant?
Yeah.
Like,
no, you're not wrong. So the timeline doesn't quite work out that way, right?
But let's be honest, if they are keeping their options open, which is disappointing, because you know it would have been a mighty fine tie-in. The Tinder date who showed up and is like, I'm sorry I'm late, I just got laid. That should have been Barney Stinson, and it totally would have worked in the timeline.
Yeah.
If like 7 years later, he's still like, yo, what up? Sorry, I'm late. I just got laid. High five.
Yeah. So I'm excited that
he will still be, beautiful Neil Patrick Harris. His Tinder photo is, everyone's like, that's an old photo. And he goes, nope, it's exactly how I still look.
I took it today.
The smile, that perfect smile we all know.
And it's going to have the little glint in it. It would work out. And it would be like, and we know that they live in the same universe because of that apartment later on. But it opens it up. The fact that they're in that apartment does open up for the fact that anyone could potentially visit in a Bare Naked Ladies fueled, like, rampage.
Yeah, sure.
Well, is there going to be a turned up real drunk because they forgot they moved out kind of thing? Like, let's all go home. And they stumble in and like, hang on, this isn't ours. Well, yeah, that's not the bar, but is there a bar that they can go to as well downstairs and sit in the old booth and have those kind of things?
I would really love if, like, a Halloween episode, they showed up asking, can we have a party on the roof? like those
as a
things.
hanging Chad and a sexy pumpkin.
Yeah. I mean, like, there's enough things that they can do with it, and it establishes it pretty nicely. So, and he also, what it does is it establishes it low enough that none of this could happen, and we understand why the two things are tied into each other.
Yep.
I guess the only complaint I have about it, the only real complaint that I have about it, is the fact that it is Jesse and Sid who live in the apartment, and not Valentina and Sophie. Because I wish everything took place in the apartment, not just when we're with them. Because already I'm a huge fan of Christopher Lowell, and I'm disappointed that he's not the main character. Like,
well, the only thing I was hoping for, in terms of when I was thinking about what possible callbacks could they have, because he is there driving an Uber and taking her somewhere. If they can bring back Ranjit as a cab driver and have him, the way Ranjit always was, whether he was driving the limo or the cab, whatever, he was that kind of other member of the friendship group. You can have those things like, dude, this isn't how you're supposed to talk to people when you drive a cab. I drive Uber, I know these things. You can put those in, and you have Ranjit going, no. This is what people like.
That would actually be great if one of these episodes it opens up with Jesse driving Uber again, and he picks up Ranjit. That right there is comedy gold.
I mean, you do a Seinfeld style story where he's in a somewhat weird road competition with a taxi driver, and it's revealed to be Ranjit, right?
Yeah,
like it's him.
Or like a who knows the city better, taxis or Ubers.
Yeah.
Oh man, now we're just giving you free ideas. How I Met Your Father. Take them though.
Yeah, if you're listening, guys. If you're listening, here you are.
All of us are literate and can write, right? Maybe we should just write something of our own, right? Instead of passing off our ideas to How I Met Your Father. They're going to need a spin-off in 15 years?
How I Met Your Sister.
How I Met Your Growth Pod. It'll be the future, you see.
How I Met You in the Matrix. And saved you from the...
Will took. Usually it's one of us that takes it to the logical endpoint, but Will, congratulations, man, rubbing off on you.
That's why I'm here.
Oh, loving it. All right, so Will, do you have a quiz for this one or no?
No, my quiz was initially going to be, I said at the beginning, I watched 4 pilots. I didn't like 2 of them. I took one as that elderly racist relative that's of its time. And I want to watch more of one of them. And the other thing was, which do you think was which?
Yeah, and I think we all figured it out that the 2 you didn't like. And I mean, How I Met Your Dad, I get it. I understand why you didn't like it. And pretty smart. I think that we both kind of connected on the same level in terms of shallow characters. But Siege and Asurgis, it gets better. And I don't have much else going on. So I mean, we're still in a pandemic, right? That's the one thing about How I Met Your Mother, How I Met Your Father, I really don't like, is that it's 2022 for them too, but they just get to be free and clear in New York.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no one wore a mask on that plane. That worried me. He was just in the queue, maskless, no worries, he wasn't doing testing before to prove he was okay to get on the plane.
I have a real question here. What is TSA pre-check? Because it's been a plot point in like 4 TV shows lately.
Oh,
and
you can pay money to cut the line. That's all it is. You can pay a certain amount of money a year, and you get to go through a shorter line, and they don't make you take your shoes off. Essentially, they do like a huge background check on you, like before you're given it. So you like apply for it. They do a huge background check on you so that they know that you are who you say you are, and then they allow you to cut the line every time you go to the. They've had this for years. As somebody that's flown for the last 15 years of his life, it's existed essentially since people started bitching about how things got worse and worse and worse after 9/11. Airlines basically were like, "Hey, we need to do something about the complaining," and the group response was, "Wait, if you give us more money, then we'll let you through faster." Was legitimately the way they came out of it, and people talk about it like it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I don't understand why people don't see what a scam it is. But anyway, I'm an old man.
So it's the same as like queue jump at Disney parks.
Yep.
It's like Fast Pass. I'll check in at the airport 3 months in advance so I can get on the plane right on the day that I'm leaving. All right.
But you pay the FBI. Like, no joke, you pay the FBI to come and rifle through your shit for a couple of months so that they can figure out exactly who you are, and then they let you through faster. And it's like, why would you do that to yourself? But anyway.
First of all, I'm paying for this privilege. Second of all, it's the same level of inconvenience, but like at my house.
Yeah. It's not great.
I don't know. It's
I just got all of my security waiting out of the way at the same time, but in my own house.
I don't know.
I'm not.
I guess if you don't have a lot going on.
And up in the air.
Well, the bigger thing, I can't believe this is what we're talking about.
Well, I was confused by it.
The bigger reason to do it, and this is something you might be interested in, is you get your work to pay for it. If there is some reason, like say that you work for a big college and you happen to have to be doing a lot of traveling for it, maybe, then you can say, hey, I need TSA pre-check. If this is going to be a major part of my job, then this is a benefit, essentially, right? And they will pay for it. You still have to put up with somebody kind of like, poking around and figuring out who you are and like needing all your like paperwork from the last 3 years as far as taxes and shit go. I'm over exaggerating a lot of this stuff, but I'm kind of not. They do start asking. They start asking some pretty serious questions before they give this to you, and then if you qualify, then they let you do this, and so a lot of companies will pay for their employees to get this. So a lot of people I know that have it as a benefit of their job, and so they brag, to high heaven about it, and they should, because it's something that they get to do for free. If I had to pay for it, it's not worth it.
It's interesting. Yeah. I didn't know. I appreciate it. And then I guess there's a little life hack that TSA PreCheck, not just a plot point in TV shows, but a real thing that can kind of benefit you. Maybe worth looking into if you travel or plan to travel. I don't know. It was very interesting to me.
They report promise.
Pemberton's is a bad name for a bar. I don't know if a proposal in front of all your friends, is that a good proposal? Is that a perfect proposal?
I would say that if they are uber modern, and they seem to all be on this show, the idea that they have probably talked before about what she would want from a proposal, and no joke, whether or not she'd say yes, it's not uncommon for that kind of stuff to be like, all right, I'm going to propose to you sometime in the next 4 months. You need to get on board with me about what that's going to look like. That is not an unusual conversation in today's day and age. Not all the time, not for everybody, but if
especially
that is
not
the
for
excuse,
Mr. Proposal Fail.
Yeah, right. And if that's not, imagine having that guy as your friend. Guess what you do on your proposal?
Dude, the best part about that, he's like, I'm his best friend. I'm going to make his proposal goes perfect. And he would do the same for me. He did not do the same for you, Jesse. What are you doing? He dropped the ball.
Yeah, but the idea that this is something pre-planned between the both of them, and still a surprise to her because she does think they are going out to Beyonce, but I wouldn't be offended if that was what the reasoning was behind it.
What a stupid lie! Like, honestly, but we're not really going to Beyonce. Oh, then we're not really getting married.
I was waiting for it. It didn't happen.
I thought she was gonna say no so hard. Like, because I'm like, this character is not seen in any of the literature for the show. Like, Josh Peck got a bigger, like, media blitz for being in this show, and he hadn't even shown up yet than Hannah did. So it's just like, and the way that she's looking, like she was shaking and everything, like it almost felt like we were going to go see Beyonce, and then I was going to break up with you because the long distance isn't working for me. And it's like, oh my God, please don't say no. We just lived through Mr. Proposal Fail in Leighton Meester. Like, I can't watch it again. So then she said yes.
If we're going to believe the montage does contain the father, at some point he potentially has to become single.
Well, potentially.
Because he was in the montage.
Yeah, well, the montage is just the four men that she met that evening.
Right.
So like, that's the thing. But really, the two people who are taken off the table are the guy who leaves to go to Australia and is kind of a dick, and then the guy who's engaged, which then leaves two uber white dudes to be the potential father. And at that point, it's just like, so you're just fucking with us by not showing us the kid? There's no kid.
Yeah.
There's no kid. It's whoever invented the software that she's talking to. Because Sophie has descended. Oh, it's Jasper?
Jasper?
She didn't meet Jasper that night, but she might.
But you never know.
All right, gang.
All
Any more about How I Met Your Father?
Yeah.
No. I'm excited to do more of it and see what happens.
I'm interested enough to keep watching at this point.
Me too.
And I think that's important. But I have to admit, it is not the same. Let's deviform the culture around me so that everybody is involved in this thing.
Yeah, for sure.
God, Sejin, I need to thank you for reminding me of the cultural impact I had around me with How I Met Your Mother.
People had like fights about that show, and all I can think is you somehow were responsible.
Yeah, no, I mean,
You're involved.
The last person, right? The person I thought of the most, going back to How I Met Your Mother, is Jay. Like, I miss Jay. I miss Jay being part of it, because as much as I joke about Will being Marshall, because really Will is his own character. He's his own unique archetype and all of that. My real Marshall, the one who was Marshall in our friend group at the time, was Jay, because he was in the relationship that we all thought was going to go on forever.
Yeah.
And it's like you're already married to this person. So like, he was a big part of that like recreating the How I Met Your Mother in my life sort of scenario. Not that that's what I did. I wasn't an insane person, but you know, I talked a lot about like the adventures that Jay and I would go on and how I question if they really happened. A lot
You know what
of
always makes me think somebody's not crazy? It's when they tell me they're not crazy.
Well, when you tell your friends this story, I'd appreciate if you avoid the word psycho.
My kids? No.
Oh, that's the other thing. I love you guys. You guys are family to me. My kids are not calling either one of you uncle unless you marry Dale.
That is a perfectly valid statement of fact.
I don't know, man. I have a lot of uncles that are just friends of the family.
No,
but
and I get that.
it.
I understand that. But, like, no, I want them to know you as Sejin. I don't want you to be Uncle Sejin.
We're not Uncle
Oh,
Squeaky.
Donkey Siege.
Donkey C.
All right, you guys made it weird.
You made it weird by being like, no, fuck you, Devin. I'm going to be Uncle Sejin.
I believe I said Uncle Squiggy.
You wish you could be Squiggy.
I would like to be referred to as Sir, and that will be all.
How come every time Will comes over, he just sits in that big armchair and sips scotch in the corner, looking at the fire pensively?
Someday I'll tell you the story of How I Met Your
We
William.
discussed the captain. And this is it. How I Met Your Captain.
There it is.
Well, we are having too much fun. All right. So anything else to add about the entire franchise and everything that we talked about today? I guess
stop trying to make it without Pamela Fry.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Pretty much.
I mean, that's really where it comes down to. I think they were trying to fail because, like, she was available to direct it if they wanted it to succeed. I guess it makes sense, right? How I Met Your Father in 2022, we're not as flabbergasted by the fact that they created it, right? Yeah. It's not a high fidelity situation.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's also the other part of it for sure.
Yeah. Oh man, I
think we've all got to a place where we've maybe not forgiven How I Met Your Mother for everything, but we're definitely okay with there being a new way of doing it.
Maybe this will be the thing that does it right. Like, that's the promise now, right? Is it's no longer like, hey, we're cut and we don't want to go back to that injury. Like, it's like, no, let's do it right this time. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, we've had 7 years to heal. We've seen how TV has gone in those 7 years, and maybe we're ready for that Christmas sweater again. And we'll see how it goes. And we will be checking in with How I Met Your Father from time to time again. This also seems like a wonderful time to officially confirm that High Fidelity was canceled after 1 season.
Yeah.
Surprise.
Surprising nobody here, unfortunately. And honestly, I do hope that How I Met Your Father is not one and done, but also I wouldn't be hyper surprised if it ended up being like just a little experiment, or what I actually think would be nice if they went anthology with it and didn't try to string out one long story longer than it has to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Especially with like
different
Hulu.
stages in life.
Well, I mean, not just different stages in life. Like, I would be all right if we met another group of friends in 2 years
Or like How I Met Your Father, The Married Years, or something.
Yeah.
Like something that's different than, yeah. I mean, we'll see. I mean, strange times as it is with streaming as it is, and going back to the nostalgia well and all that good stuff. I mean, that's the other reason we had to talk about this, right? Is it really was like coming to a head of a bunch of stuff that we always talk about.
We always kind of drift to How I Met Your Mother. Turns out it's because I indoctrinated you in it, Siege, and at such a young age. Yeah.
Oh.
But yeah, this is fun. It was good to hear. Will, thank you so much for stopping by. Anything that you want to say, plug, do while you're here and you have the floor?
I mean, I wish I could say buy my book, watch the series, but I don't have either of those things. So I'll just say thanks for having me.
All right, well, we're always willing to have you too, Will, as long as we can work out the crazy 14-hour time difference.
I know there's also you guys recording at evening and me being in the morning. It just doesn't work.
Doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, like, everything Will said is pre-recorded and we just have to react around it.
It's much like the Doctor Who episode Blink. You guys have got half a script and you're working with it.
That was awesome. That was the best burn on Blink I've ever heard. Siege, anything else you'd like to add, brother? Brother buddy?
No. So we're doing this week because I am off at Sundance, so I'm excited to talk to you guys about whatever that turns into next week. It's going to be a streamathon. So I'm watching a bunch of stuff right now. So sorry we could not do a live one and talk about all the crazy stuff going on right now, but yeah, we'll be back next week with a real live one.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, keyboard watch, the keyboard that I had last week, it's already broken. So who knows what's going to happen with the keyboards that are waiting to arrive from me and Siegen. Stay tuned and keep listening. And in terms of that, if there's any other nostalgic things you'd like us to consider for an Epicsode, you can find us online at The Say Report. If you want to talk specifically about How I Met Your Mother, I am apparently one of the high priests of the series, and you can find me on Twitter at Devin D. Decker.
Send me all of your hate for getting you to watch at least one episode Pretty Smart at Siege versus the Worlds.
And if you want to tell me why I'm wrong about Pretty Smart, you can find me at 4809.
All right. So until next time, other Will, please bring us home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devin Decker and Siegen Selwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.